The morning mist clung to the pine trees like desperate fingers, refusing to let go as dawn broke over Silverwood Pack territory. Maya pressed her face against the cold window of her small cabin, watching the other wolves emerge from their homes with the confident stride that came from knowing exactly where they belonged. She had never possessed that certainty, that bone-deep understanding of her place in the world that seemed to come so naturally to everyone else. At 22, Maya had spent her entire life as background noise in a symphony of stronger, more important voices. The daughter of the pack's former healer, she had inherited her mother's gentle touch with herbs and wounds, but none of the commanding presence that would have made her truly valued. Her wolf was small, unremarkable, the kind that other pack members looked through rather than at. She had accepted long ago that her role was to tend the gardens, help with minor injuries, and fade into the woodwork whenever anything truly significant happened. Today felt different, though. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an energy that made her skin prickle and her wolf pace restlessly beneath the surface. Something was coming. Something that would shatter the careful routine she had built around her insignificance. The knock on her door came just as she was braiding her dark hair, preparing for another day of quiet usefulness. Elder Bronson stood on her threshold, his weathered face grave with the kind of news that changed everything. Behind him stood two other council members, their expressions carefully neutral, but their postures radiating the tension that came with difficult decisions. "Maya," Bronson said without preamble, "we need to speak with you about Helena." The name hit her like a physical blow. Helena Ravencrest, the golden daughter of the most powerful family in the pack, the woman who had been groomed since birth to become their Luna. Beautiful, strong, intelligent, everything that Maya was not. Helena, who had vanished 3 days ago without a trace, leaving behind only a hastily scrawled note that explained nothing and apologized for everything. "She's gone," Maya said quietly, not bothering to make it a question. The whole pack knew by now, though no one spoke of it openly. The shame of their perfect Lunelect abandoning them on the eve of her ceremonial bonding was too fresh, too raw. "She is," Bronson confirmed, stepping inside without invitation. "Which brings us to you." Maya's hands stilled on her braid. "I don't understand." Elder Thorne, a stern woman with silver streaking her black hair, moved forward with the precise steps of someone delivering a verdict. "The Alpha cannot remain unbonded. The pack laws are clear on this matter. Without a Luna by the winter solstice, his authority becomes questionable. Other packs are already circling, sensing weakness." "I still don't understand what this has to do with me," Maya said, though a cold dread was beginning to settle in her chest like ice water. "You're unmarked, unbonded, and of appropriate age," the third elder, Marcus, said bluntly. "More importantly, you're unremarkable enough that no one will question why the Alpha settled for less than he deserved. You'll be a placeholder, nothing more." The words shouldn't have stung. Maya had known her entire life that she was unremarkable, had made peace with being overlooked and undervalued. But hearing it stated so matter-of-factly, as if her entire existence could be summed up in the phrase, "settled for less," cut deeper than she expected. "You want me to marry Alpha Connor," she said slowly, testing the words on her tongue. They tasted like copper and impossibility. "We want you to accept the temporary Luna position until Helena returns," Bronson corrected. This is a political necessity, not a romantic arrangement. You'll perform the ceremonial duties, attend the required functions, and provide the pack with the stability they need. When Helena comes back, as we're confident she will, you'll step aside gracefully. Maya sank into her worn armchair, the weight of their proposal settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. And what does the Alpha think of this plan? The elders exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Alpha Connor understands the necessity of the situation, Thorne said carefully. He's agreed to the arrangement. Of course he had. Connor Blackwood had been raised to put the pack's needs above his own, trained from childhood to sacrifice personal desires for the greater good. If the council told him he needed a placeholder Luna to maintain stability, he would accept it with the same grim determination he brought to every unpleasant duty. Maya had watched him from a distance for years, admiring the way he commanded respect without ever raising his voice, the quiet strength that seemed to radiate from him like heat from a forge. He was everything an alpha should be: powerful, decisive, protective of those under his care. He was also completely, utterly beyond her reach, existing in a world of pack politics and leadership responsibilities that she could never hope to enter. Except now, she was being invited in, not as herself, but as a poor substitute for the woman who should have been by his side. I need time to think, she said finally. Time is a luxury we don't have, Marcus replied. The ceremony must take place within the week if we're to meet the solstice deadline. Your answer, Maya. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine herself standing beside Connor Blackwood, trying to fill Helena's shoes. The image wouldn't form properly. Helena was tall, where Maya was short, confident where Maya was uncertain, commanding where Maya preferred to fade into the background. They were as different as fire and water, and everyone would see the comparison. But the alternative was watching her pack fall apart, seeing Connor lose his authority because their chosen Luna had fled rather than face her responsibilities. Maya might not be much, but she couldn't bear the thought of being too selfish to help when her people needed her. Yes, she whispered, the word barely audible. I'll din it. The relief on the elders' faces was palpable, though they tried to hide it behind professional composure. Good, Bronson said. The preparations will begin immediately. You'll move to the pack house tonight to begin your instruction in lunar duties. After they left, Maya sat in her empty cabin and tried to understand what she had just agreed to. In less than a week, she would be bound to the most powerful man in the territory, standing in for a woman who was everything she could never be. The thought terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. The pack house rose from the heart of Silverwood territory, like a monument to werewolf tradition. Its stone walls weathered by decades of mountain winters, but still radiating the strength and permanence that had made it the seat of pack leadership for 3 generations. Maya stood at the base of the wide stone steps, a single bag containing her few possessions clutched in her white-knuckled grip, and tried to find the courage to climb. She had walked past this building countless times over the years, but never as someone who belonged inside. The handful of occasions when her healing skills had been needed here, she had used the servant's entrance, keeping her head down and speaking only when spoken to. Now, she was expected to enter through the front doors as if she had every right to be there. Second thoughts? The deep voice behind her made Maya jump, spinning around to face the man who would soon be her husband in everything but truth. Connor Blackwood stood 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the golden flecks in his dark brown eyes, the small scar that cut through his left eyebrow from some long-ago battle. He was even more imposing up close than from a distance, standing well over 6 feet, with the kind of broad shoulders that came from a lifetime of physical labor and combat training. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, but perfectly suited his rugged features, and when he moved, there was a fluid grace that spoke of absolute confidence in his own body. This was a man who had never doubted his place in the world, never questioned whether he deserved the power he wielded. Maya started, then stopped, unsure how to finish the sentence. Yes, she was having second thoughts. Yes, she was terrified of making a fool of herself. Yes, she was already regretting agreeing to something so far beyond her capabilities. Connor stepped closer, and Maya caught his scent pine and leather and something indefinably masculine that made her wolf stir with interest. "Walk with me," he said. And it wasn't quite a command, but it wasn't really a request either. They moved away from the pack house, following a warm path that led into the forest. Maya kept pace beside him, hyper-aware of the way her shoulder almost brushed his arm, the way his presence seemed to dwarf everything around them. She had never been this close to him for this long, had never had his undivided attention focused on her with such intensity. "The elders told you this was temporary," Connor said after they had walked in silence for several minutes. "Yes." Maya's voice sounded small in the vast quiet of the trees. "Until Helena comes back." Connor stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression she couldn't read. "And you're comfortable with that arrangement? Being a placeholder?" There was something in his tone that made Maya look up sharply, meeting his eyes for the first time since their conversation began. She expected to see resignation there, maybe irritation at being saddled with an unwanted responsibility. Instead, she found something that looked almost like curiosity. "I don't have much choice," she said honestly. "The pack needs stability, and I'm available." "Available," Connor repeated, as if tasting the word. "Is that how you see yourself? Available for whatever purpose others decide you should serve?" The question stung because it was too close to the truth. Maya had spent her life being useful in whatever small ways she could, never questioning whether she might want something different, something more. "I see myself as someone who helps when help is needed," she said carefully. Connor studied her face with an intensity that made her skin warm. "And what if I told you I don't want a placeholder Luna? What if I want a real partner? Someone who chooses to be here instead of being chosen by circumstances?" Maya's breath caught. "I would say that you deserve better than what you're getting." Something shifted in Connor's expression, a softening that transformed his entire face. "Better," he said quietly. "Define better." "Someone like Helena," Maya said without thinking. "Someone beautiful and strong and born to be a Luna. Someone who knows how to command respect and lead by example. Someone the pack will follow without question. Someone who ran away rather than face her responsibilities," Connor said with an edge to his voice that Maya had never heard before. "Someone who left a note instead of having the courage to explain her reasons face to face." Maya stared at him, shocked by the bitterness in his words. She had assumed that Helena's disappearance had been as devastating for Connor as it had been shocking for the pack, that he was mourning the loss of his intended mate, even as he accepted the necessity of a replacement. "You're not heartbroken," she said, the realization hitting her like a revelation. Connor's laugh was sharp and entirely without humor. "Helena and I were matched by the council when we were children. We barely knew each other beyond what was required for public appearances. I respected her position and her family's standing. But heartbroken?" He shook his head. "No, relieved might be a more accurate description. Relieved? Relieved that I won't have to spend the rest of my life pretending to love someone I barely liked," Connor said bluntly. "Helena was everything you described. Beautiful, strong, born to leadership. She was also cold, calculating, and completely uninterested in anything beyond her own ambitions. The idea of being bound to her. For life was... well..." He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "Let's just say I understand why she ran." Maya felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about the situation, about Connor's feelings and motivations, was suddenly in question. "Then why are you doing this? Why accept a political marriage at all?" "Because the pack needs stability," Connor said simply. "Because my personal preferences matter less than the welfare of 300 people who depend on me to make difficult choices. Because sometimes being alpha means sacrificing what you want for what your people need." They had reached a small clearing, where wildflowers grew in patches of color between the towering pines. Connor sat on the fallen log and gestured for Maya to join him. She perched on the edge, maintaining careful distance while trying to process everything he had told her. "I want you to understand something," Connor said after a moment. "This doesn't have to be just a political arrangement. I know what the elders told you, but they don't speak for me. If you're willing, if you want more than just being a temporary substitute, then we can make this into something real." Maya's heart began beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. "I don't understand." "I'm saying that maybe the moon goddess had a plan when she allowed Helena to disappear and brought you to my attention instead," Connor said, his voice dropping to a rumble that seemed to vibrate through her. "Bones. I'm saying that I've watched you over the years, seen how you care for others, how you put their needs before your own. I've seen your kindness and your strength, even if you don't recognize it in yourself. You've watched me?" Maya whispered. Connor nodded. "Did you think I didn't notice when you stayed up all night tending to Marcus's grandson? When he had fever? Or when you used your own money to buy supplies for the pregnant Omega who couldn't afford proper nutrition? Did you think I didn't see how you always volunteer for the jobs no one else wants? How you never ask for recognition or reward?" Maya felt heat flooding her cheeks. She had thought her small acts of service went unnoticed by anyone who mattered, that her contributions were too insignificant to attract the attention of someone like Connor. "I was just doing what anyone would do," she said weakly. "No," Connor said firmly. "You were doing what you do, which is put others before yourself, even when it costs you. That's not common, Maya. That's rare and valuable, and exactly what a Luna should be." Maya's chest felt tight with emotions she couldn't name. "But I'm not. I'm not like Helena. I don't know how to be commanding or intimidating. I can't make people respect me just by walking into a room." "Good," Connor said, surprising her. "We have enough intimidating leaders. What we need is someone who leads with compassion, someone the pack feels comfortable approaching with their problems, someone who heals instead of just protecting." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, his fingers brushed against her cheek with a gentleness that made her shiver. I'm offering you a choice, Maya. We can do this the way the elders planned a temporary arrangement that dissolves when Helena returns. Or we can build something together, something real and lasting. The decision is yours. Maya looked into his eyes and saw something she had never expected to see, directed at her genuine interest, respect, and the beginning of something that might eventually become love. The logical part of her mind screamed warnings about reaching for things beyond her station, about the impossibility of someone like her making a life with someone like him. But her heart, her foolish, hopeful heart, whispered that maybe Connor was right. Maybe the moon goddess had a plan that didn't involve her being a pale substitute for someone else. Maybe, for once in her life, she was being offered something that was meant specifically for her. I choose real, she said softly, the words feeling like a leap off a cliff into unknown territory. Connor's smile was like sunrise after a long night, warm and transformative, and entirely focused on her. Then let's make this real. The engagement ceremony took place 3 days later in the pack's sacred grove, a circle of ancient oaks that had witnessed countless wharf traditions over the decades. Maya stood before the gathered pack, in a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, her hands trembling as Connor slipped the traditional lunar pendant around her neck. The silver moon charm felt heavier than it should have, weighted with the expectations of everyone watching. Maya could see doubt in some faces, curiosity in others, and in a few, the kind of disdain that came from those who believed she was reaching far above her station. Elder Bronson's voice carried across the clearing as he recited the ancient words that would bind them together, first in the eyes of the pack, and later, at the full ceremony, in the eyes of the moon goddess herself. Maya tried to focus on the ritual, on the gravity of what she was accepting, but her attention kept drifting to Connor's steady presence beside her. He had dressed formally for the occasion, in a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the intensity of his eyes. When the time came for him to speak his intention, his voice rang clear and certain across the grove. I, Connor Blackwood, Alpha of the Silverwood Pack, claim Maya Thorne as my chosen mate and Luna. I pledge to protect her, honor her, and stand beside her as long as the moon rises in the night sky. Maya's response stuck in her throat for a moment, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a physical force. Then she felt Connor's hand squeeze hers gently, and she found her voice. I, Maya Thorne, accept the position of Luna to the Silverwood Pack. I pledge to serve with wisdom, lead with compassion, and stand beside Alpha Connor as long as the moon lights our path. The traditional words felt strange on her tongue, as if she were speaking someone else's lines in a play she had never auditioned for. But when Connor lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, sealing their engagement, Maya felt something shift inside her chest. This was real now, as real as she chose to make it. The pack's response was polite, but subdued. The kind of restrained approval that came from people making the best of an unexpected situation. Maya caught sight of several younger pack members whispering among themselves, their expressions clearly questioning whether their temporary Luna was truly up to the challenge ahead. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the pack house where Maya found herself surrounded by well-wishers who seemed to be measuring every word. They spoke to her. She smiled and thanked people for their congratulations, while feeling like an imposter wearing someone else's life. You look like you're about to bolt, a warm voice said beside her, and Maya turned to find Isabella Martinez approaching with 2 glasses of wine. Isabella served as the PAC's coordinator for community events, a position that required diplomacy and the ability to manage strong personalities. She was one of the few PAC members who had ever treated Maya as more than just background noise. Is it that obvious? Maya asked, accepting the wine gratefully. Only to someone who's been in your shoes, Isabella said with a knowing smile. When I first married Roberto and became part of his family's business, I spent the first 6 months convinced everyone was waiting for me to prove I didn't belong. How did you get past it? I realized that half the people who seemed so confident were just as scared as I was. They were just better at hiding it, Isabella said. And the other half were too busy worrying about their own problems to spend much time judging mine. Maya glanced around the room, trying to see the gathering through Isabella's eyes. Connor was speaking with a group of senior PAC members near the fireplace. His posture relaxed but alert. Several families with young children clustered near the refreshment table. The adults engaged in animated conversations, while the children ran between the groups with the endless energy of Camptor. Youth. They're not all watching me, Maya realized, the observation surprising her. Exactly, Isabella confirmed. Most people are too caught up in their own lives to spend much energy critiquing yours. The ones who are judging you? She shrugged. They were going to find fault no matter what you did. Some people are just determined to be unhappy. Before Maya could respond, Connor appeared at her elbow with the kind of timing that suggested he had been keeping an eye on her throughout the evening. Ladies, he said with a slight bow that made Isabella laugh. Your alpha has very pretty manners, Isabella told Maya with a teasing grin. You should keep him. I'll take that under advisement, Maya said, feeling some of her tension ease in the face of Isabella's easy humour. Connor offered Maya his arm. Walk with me. I think we've fulfilled our social obligations for one evening. Maya nodded gratefully, ready to escape the crowd and the constant awareness of being watched and evaluated. They stepped out onto the pack house's wide stone terrace, where strings of lights created a warm glow against the gathering darkness. How are you holding up? Connor asked as they settled on a bench overlooking the gardens. Like I'm wearing a costume that doesn't quite fit, Maya admitted. Everyone's being very polite, but I can see them wondering if I'm really up to this. Connor was quiet for a long moment, studying her profile in the soft light. Do you want to know what I see when I look at you right now? Maya turned to meet his eyes, not trusting herself to speak. I see someone who stood in front of 300 people and made promises she intends to keep, even though she's terrified, Connor said. I see someone who's more worried about disappointing others than about protecting herself. I see someone who has no idea how strong she really is. I don't feel strong, Maya whispered. Strength isn't about not being afraid, Connor said, shifting closer to her on the bench. It's about being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway. You think Helena was fearless? She was terrified of being trapped, of not living up to expectations, of making the wrong choice. The difference is that she let that fear drive her away. You let it drive you forward. Maya felt something warm unfurling in her chest at his words. How do you know what Helena was thinking? Connor's expression darkened slightly. Because she told me, the last time we spoke before she disappeared. She said she felt like she was drowning in other people's expectations, that she didn't know who she really was, underneath all the training and preparation for becoming Luna. That's so sad. Maya said, and meant it. Despite everything, she found herself feeling sorry for Helena rather than resentful. The pressure of being groomed for leadership from childhood, of having your entire identity wrapped up in fulfilling other people's dreams, must have been suffocating. It is, Connor agreed, but it's also her choice to make. She chose to run rather than face her fears. You're choosing to face yours. Maya looked out over the gardens, where moonlight silvered the leaves of the herb plots she had helped design and maintain over the years. What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not what you need? Connor's hand covered hers on the bench, his thumb tracing gentle circles over her knuckles. Maya, look at me. She turned, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You are exactly what I need, he said with quiet conviction. Not because you're filling Helena's place, but because you're you. Because you care more about others than yourself. Because you see problems and try to solve them, instead of waiting for someone else to take action. Because you make me want to be a better alpha, a better man. The words hit Maya like a physical force, pushing past all her carefully constructed defenses and settling deep in her chest, where she would carry them like treasures. No one had ever spoken to her like this, as if she were precious and valuable and exactly right, just as she was. I don't know how to be what everyone expects, she said softly. Then don't be, Connor said simply. Be yourself and let everyone else adjust their expectations. As if to emphasize his point, he lifted their joined hands and pressed another gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture sending warmth racing up her arm and settling in her heart like a promise. Maya closed her eyes and let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like to truly belong here beside him. The fantasy was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure, and for the first time since this whole impossible situation began, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she might actually deserve it. The full bonding ceremony was scheduled for the night of the winter solstice. Just 4 days away. Maya spent the intervening time in a whirlwind of preparation that left her feeling like she was being swept along by forces beyond her control. There were fittings for the elaborate lunar dress that had been in Connor's family for 3 generations. Meetings with the pack's various department heads to discuss her future responsibilities, and intensive coaching sessions with the elders on proper ceremonial protocol. Maya's days began before dawn with physical training designed to strengthen her connection to her wolf, continued through morning lessons on Kai, pack law and governance, and ended with evening instruction in the social graces expected of a Luna. She fell into bed each night, exhausted and overwhelmed. Her dreams filled with endless variations of herself making mistakes in front of the entire pack. The one bright spot in the chaos was Connor himself. Despite his own busy schedule of alpha duties, he made time to check time on her throughout each day, appearing with cups of tea when she was struggling through legal documents or offering quiet encouragement when she stumbled over the formal language of ancient Crass. Ceremonies. It was during one of these impromptu visits that Maya finally worked up the courage to voice the fear that had been growing stronger with each passing day. What if she comes back? She asked as Connor settled beside her in the pack house library, where she had been attempting to memorize the genealogies of allied packs. Connor leapt up from the report he had been reading, his attention immediately focused entirely on her. Helena? What if she changes her mind and comes back before the ceremony? Or what if she shows up afterward, and wants to reclaim her position. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper, but the words seemed to echo in the quiet room. The elders made it clear that this is supposed to be temporary. If she returns? If she returns, she'll find that her position has been filled by someone better suited to it, Connor said firmly. Maya shook her head. You can't know that. She's everything a Luna should be. Strong, confident, born to leadership. I'm just... You're what? Connor prompted when she trailed off. I'm just me, Maya finished helplessly. Nobody special. Nobody who matters. Connor set his report aside and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Maya, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You matter to me. You matter to this pack, even if some of them are too stubborn or short-sighted to see it yet. And you matter to yourself, whether you recognize it or not. But if Helena made her choice when she left, Connor interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha who would not be argued with. She chose to abandon her responsibilities, her pack, and me, rather than face the challenges of leadership. That's not strength, Maya. That's cowardice. Maya flinched at the harshness in his tone. She had never heard Connor speak of anyone with such clear contempt, and it made her wonder what had really passed between him and Helena before she disappeared. I'm sorry, Connor said immediately, his expression softening as he noticed her reaction. I didn't mean to sound so bitter. That I need you to understand that Helena's return wouldn't change anything for me. Even if she came back tomorrow and begged for forgiveness, I wouldn't take her as my Luna. Because of duty? Maya asked. Because of choice, Connor corrected. Because I've seen what real courage looks like, and it looks like you accepting a position you never wanted because your pack needed you. It looks like you facing your fears instead of running from them. It looks like you caring more about everyone else's happiness than your own comfort. Maya felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. I'm so scared of disappointing you. Connor reached out slowly, cupping her face in his hands with a gentleness that made her heart skip. Maya, you could never disappoint me. Frustrated me, maybe, if you keep insisting on undervaluing yourself. But disappoint? Never. His thumbs brushed away the tears that had started to fall despite her efforts to hold them back. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see home. I see the person I want to wake up next to every morning and fall asleep beside every night. I see my partner, my equal, my choice. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and possibility. Maya searched Connor's face, looking for any sign that he was just saying what he thought she needed to hear. Instead, she found only sincerity and an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in his world. Even if I never become the Luna everyone expects, she whispered. Especially then, Connor said, I don't want the Luna everyone expects. I want the Luna I choose. I want you. This time, when he leaned in to kiss her, Maya didn't pull away. His lips were warm and soft against hers, the kiss gentle and questioning rather than demanding. It tasted like promise and possibility, like the beginning of something beautiful and terrifying and entirely their own. When they finally broke apart, Maya felt like something fundamental had shifted inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was no longer the dominant emotion. For the first time since this whole impossible situation began, she felt like she might actually belong here beside him. I want that too, she said softly. I want to be your choice. Connor's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face with warmth and joy. Then that's what you'll be. My choice, my Luna, my partner in everything that matters. The night of the winter solstice arrived with a clarity that seemed almost supernatural. The sky so clear that every star was visible in brilliant detail above the sacred grove where the ceremony would take place. Maya stood in her small cabin, now empty of most of her possessions, and studied her reflection in the mirror that had belonged to her mother. The Luna dress was a masterpiece of werewolf craftsmanship, its silver fabric seeming to capture and reflect the moonlight even indoors. The bodice was fitted with delicate beadwork that told the story of the pack's founding, while the full skirt moved like liquid mercury with every step. A crown of silver leaves and tiny crystals would complete the ensemble, marking her as the pack's spiritual as well as political leader. Maya barely recognized herself in the formal regalia. The woman in the mirror looked regal, important, like someone he might actually deserve to stand beside Connor Blackwood as his equal. It was a disturbing and wonderful transformation, one that made her feel like she was looking at a stranger who happened to wear her face. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation, and Isabella's voice cooled through the door. Maya? It's time. Maya took one last look at the woman in the mirror, drew a deep breath that tasted like pine needles and winter air, and opened the door to step into her new life. The walk to the sacred grove felt both endless and far too short. Isabella walked beside her, serving as her attendant in the ancient ritual, while Elder Bronson led the way with the ceremonial torch that would light the sacred fire. Behind them, the entire pack followed in silence, their footsteps muffled by the snow that had begun falling just after sunset. The grove itself had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Hundreds of candles flickered among the ancient oaks, their light reflecting off the snow and creating an atmosphere that seemed to exist outside normal time and space. At the center of the circle, Connor waited beside the altar stone, dressed in the formal regalia of his position. Maya's breath caught when she saw him. The traditional alpha ceremonial clothing emphasized his natural commanding presence, but it was the expression on his face that made her stumble slightly in her careful progress toward the altar. He was looking at her as if she were the answer to every prayer he had ever whispered, as if she were precious beyond measure and exactly what he had been waiting for his entire life. The ceremony itself passed in a haze of ancient words and ritual actions that Maya performed on instinct, guided by weeks of preparation and the steady presence of Connor beside her. She spoke the sacred vows that bound her to the pack and to him, her voice growing stronger with each word as she felt the truth of her commitment settling into her bones. When Connor took her hands for the final binding, his eyes were bright with emotion she had never expected to see, directed at her. Maya Thorne, he said, his voice carrying across the silent grove. I claim you as my mate, my Luna, my chosen partner in all things. Will you accept this bond freely given? I will, Maya said, and the words rang with a conviction that surprised her. I accept this bond and offer my own freely in return. The moment their hands joined in the final ritual clasp, Maya felt something fundamental shift in her chest. It was as if a missing piece of herself had suddenly clicked into place, completing a picture she hadn't realized was incomplete. The pack's bond, which had always been a distant whisper at the edge of her consciousness, suddenly blazed to life with a strength that nearly knocked her off her feet. She could feel them, all 300 individual sparks of life connected to her through silver threads of pack magic. Their emotions washed over her in dawn. A gentle wave, acceptance from some, curiosity from others, and from a surprising number, genuine affection and approval. But strongest of all was Connor's presence, bright and warm, and so close it felt like he was sharing her heartbeat. His wolf reached out to hers in greeting, and Maya's smaller, quieter wolf responded with a joy that bubbled up through her chest and escaped as laughter. The sound of her happiness seemed to break the spell that had held the grove in reverent silence. Suddenly, the air was filled with howls of celebration as the pack welcomed their new Luna. Their voices raised in harmony that echoed off the mountains and seemed to shake the very stars. Connor's arms came around her waist, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle that made her laugh again. When he set her down, his forehead rested against hers, his eyes bright with happiness. "Hello, Luna," he whispered, just for her. "Hello, Alpha," she whispered back, and felt like she was finally, truly home. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn, with the entire pack gathering in the main hall to feast and dance in honor of their new Luna. Maya found herself swept from group to group, accepting congratulations and good wishes from pack members who seemed genuinely pleased with the evening's events. It wasn't until much later, when she and Connor finally escaped to the privacy of the Alpha's quarters in the pack house, that Maya allowed herself to fully process what had happened. She stood in the middle of the large sitting room that was now hers as much as his, still wearing the ceremonial dress, but feeling completely transformed by the events of the evening. "No regrets?" Connor asked softly from where he stood by the fireplace, having traded his formal clothes for simple jeans and a sweater that made him look younger and more approachable. Maya considered the question seriously, taking inventory of her emotions. The bond hummed contentedly in her chest, a warm presence that made her feel less alone than she had in years. The pack's acceptance, tentative though some of it might be, filled spaces in her heart she hadn't realized were empty. "No regrets," she said finally, meaning it completely. Terrified about what comes next, but no regrets. Connor crossed the room to stand before her, his hands coming up to gently remove the crystal crown from her hair. His fingers combed through the dark strands, working out the elaborate styling until her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "Better," he said with satisfaction. "You're beautiful in the formal regalia, but I prefer you like this. Real, approachable, mine." The possessive note in his voice sent warmth spiraling through Maya's body, settling low in her belly with an intensity that surprised her. She had expected the political marriage, had prepared herself for the ceremonial bonding, but she hadn't anticipated the way her body would respond to Connor's presence now that they were truly mated. "Yours," she agreed, softly, testing the word on her tongue. It should have felt strange, being claimed so completely by someone who had been little more than a distant fantasy just weeks ago. Instead, it felt right, in a way that made her wolf purr with contentment. Connor's hands cupped her face, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones with reverent care. "I know this is all happening very fast," he said quietly. "I don't want you to feel pressured into anything you're not ready for." Maya looked up at him, This powerful man, who was giving her the choice to set the pace of their relationship, despite the fact that they were now legally and spiritually bound. The consideration, the respect for her autonomy, even in this situation, made her heart swell with an emotion that felt suspiciously like love. "What if I'm ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Connor's eyes darkened, but his touch remained gentle. "Then I would say that I've been waiting my entire life for you, and I don't want to wait anymore." Maya rose on her toes, her hands fisting in the soft fabric of his sweater as she pulled him down to her level. This kiss was different from the gentle, exploratory touches they had shared before. Deeper, more urgent, full of promise and possession, and the kind of desperate hunger that came from finally being able to claim what you wanted most. Connor's arms came around her, one hand tangling in her hair, while the other pressed against the small of her back, pulling her against him until there was no space left between their bodies. Maya could feel the rapid beat of his heart against her chest, could taste the wine he had drunk during the celebration, could smell the scent that was purely him mixing with her own until they became something new and entirely theirs. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Connor rested his forehead against hers with a shaky exhale. "Are you sure?" he asked, one final time. Instead of answering with words, Maya reached behind herself for the hidden zipper of the ceremonial dress, her eyes never leaving his face. The silver fabric pooled at her feet like moonlight, leaving her standing before him in nothing but the delicate undergarments that had been part of the traditional bridal ensemble. Connor's sharp intake of breath was audible in the quiet room, his eyes tracing over her body with an intensity that made her skin burn everywhere his gaze touched. "Beautiful," he said reverently, his voice rough with desire and something deeper. "So beautiful." Maya had never felt beautiful before, had spent her life being overlooked and undervalued, but standing here in the firelight with Connor looking at her as if she were a goddess made flesh, she finally understood what it meant to Graz. They truly desired. The rest of the night passed in a haze of gentle touches and whispered endearments, of Connor worshipping her body with a reverence that made tears prick at her eyes. He was infinitely patient, taking time to learn what made her gasp and arch beneath his hands, murmuring praise against her skin that made her feel like she was the most precious thing in his world. When they finally came together, it was with a completeness that went far beyond the physical. Maya felt their bond crystallize into something unbreakable, felt their wolves settle into perfect harmony, felt herself becoming part of something larger and more beautiful than she had ever imagined possible. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the massive bed that dominated the Alpha's bedroom, Maya traced patterns on Connor's chest and marveled at how right this felt. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for weeks had finally quieted, replaced by a deep sense of belonging that settled into her bones like a blessing. "I love you," Connor said quietly into the darkness, his fingers combing through her hair with gentle repetition. Maya lifted her head to look at him, seeing truth and vulnerability in his expression that took her breath away. "I love you too," she replied, and realized that somewhere along the way, without her noticing, it had become completely true. Connor's smile was radiant, even in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "My Luna," he said, voice full of wonder and possession and perfect contentment. "Your Luna," Maya agreed, and for the first time in her life, She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The first months of Maya's tenure as Luna passed more smoothly than she had dared to hope. The pack members who had initially been skeptical of her appointment gradually warmed to her approach, which emphasized accessibility and genuine care for individual needs over the more formal leadership style they had expected from Helena. Maya established regular office hours when any pack member could come to her with problems, instituted a community garden project that brought together wolves from different social levels, and quietly worked behind the scenes to address issues that others might have considered beneath a Luna's notice. When the Hendersons' teenage son got into trouble with human authorities, Maya was the one who sat with them through the long night of legal proceedings. When elderly Mrs. Patterson needed help managing her late husband's affairs, Maya spent an entire weekend organizing paperwork and making phone calls to various agencies. Her approach was so different from what the pack had expected that it took time for people to understand what she was offering. But gradually, word spread that the new Luna was someone who actually listened, who remembered the names of pack members' children and asked after sick relatives and noticed when someone was struggling, even if they tried to hide it. Connor watched her growing confidence with obvious pride, supporting her initiatives and frequently telling anyone who would listen how fortunate the pack was to have her as their Luna. The relationship deepened with each passing day, built on genuine respect and affection that had grown into something approaching complete devotion. Maya was reviewing applications for the pack's scholarship program when Isabella knocked on her office door, her expression unusually serious. "Luna, we have a situation," Isabella said without preamble. "Helena is back." The words hit Maya like a physical blow, all the air leaving her lungs in a sudden rush. She had always known this moment might come, but after months of building a life with Connor and the pack, she had begun to hope that maybe Helena would stay wherever she had gone. "Where?" Maya managed to ask. "She's at the border with Marcus and 2 other border guards," Isabella reported. "She's requesting permission to return to pack lands and speak with the Alpha." Marcus sent a runner to notify Connor, but he's in meetings with the council from White Mountain Pack. They won't be finished for another hour, at least. Maya closed her eyes, trying to center herself and access the calm strength that Connor had helped her develop over the past months. When she opened them again, Isabella was watching her with concern and something that looked like fierce protectiveness. "What are you going to do?" Isabella asked. Maya stood, smoothing her hands down the simple blue dress she had worn for her scholarship review meetings. She looked nothing like the elaborate Luna regalia she had worn on her bonding night, but she felt more genuinely herself than she ever had in formal clothing. "I'm going to meet her," Maya said quietly. "As Luna of this pack, it's my responsibility to deal with wolves seeking readmission to our territory." Isabella's eyes widened. "Maya, are you sure?" "You could wait for Connor." "No," Maya said firmly. "This is something I need to handle myself. Helena and I need to have this conversation without Connor's presence complicating things." The drive to the border took 20 minutes, during which Maya tried to prepare herself for seeing the woman who had been meant to live the life she was now living. She had imagined this moment countless times over the past months, had rehearsed various scenarios in her stash head. But now that it was actually happening, all her careful preparations felt inadequate. Marcus met her at the border station, his weathered face creased with concern. "Luna, I wasn't expecting you to come personally. Should I send for the Alpha? That won't be necessary, Maya said with more confidence than she felt. Where is she? Marcus gestured toward a small building that served as a temporary holding area for wolves seeking permission to enter pack territory. She's being cooperative, he reported, respectful. But she's different than she was before she left. Maya nodded, steeling herself for what was to come. I'll speak with her alone. Helena Ravencrest stood with her back to the door when Maya entered the small room, looking out the single window at the forest beyond. She had always been tall and elegant, but months away from the pack had changed her in subtle ways. Her golden hair was shorter, styled in a practical cut that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. She wore simple traveling clothes instead of the designer outfits that had been her trademark. And there was something about her posture that suggested hard-won wisdom rather than inherited confidence. When she turned at the sound of Maya's entrance, her green eyes showed none of the superiority or dismissal that Maya had expected. Instead, she looked tired, older than her 24 years, and genuinely surprised to see Maya wearing the Luna's pendant that should have been hers. Maya, Helena said quietly, I wasn't expecting. I thought Connor would come. Connor is busy with pack business, Maya replied, keeping her voice level and professional. As Luna, I'm authorized to handle requests for readmission to our territory. Something flickered in Helena's eyes at Maya's use of the Luna title, but it wasn't anger or resentment. If anything, it looked like relief. You married him, Helena observed, her gaze dropping to the mate bond ring on Maya's left hand. The council's emergency plan worked out better than they expected. It wasn't just the council's plan, Maya said carefully. Connor and I chose each other. Helena nodded slowly, settling into one of the room's simple chairs, with a grace that had clearly been ingrained from childhood. I'm glad, she said, and the sincerity in her voice surprised Maya. I was hoping. When I decided to come back, I was hoping I would find that my leaving had opened doors instead of just causing problems. Maya remained standing, uncertain how to interpret Helena's words. Why did you come back? To apologize, Helena said simply. To explain, if anyone wants to hear explanations. And to ask for permission to visit my family's graves before I leave again. Leave again? Maya repeated. You're not planning to stay? Helena's laugh was soft and entirely without bitterness. Maya, look at yourself. Really? Look. You're wearing the lunar pendant like you were born to it, standing there with the kind of quiet authority that can't be faked or learned. You've found your place here, haven't you? Maya touched the pendant instinctively, thinking of the months she had spent growing into the role, the relationships she had built, the life she had created beside Connor. Yes, she said honestly, I have. Good, Helena said, with obvious satisfaction. Then my instincts were right. When I ran away, I wasn't just running from my responsibilities. I was running toward the possibility that maybe the moon goddess had a different plan, one that would work out better for everyone involved. Maya stared at her, trying to process the implications of what Helena was saying. You planned this? Not planned exactly, Helena corrected, but hoped for. Maya, I spent my entire life being groomed to be Luna, being told that my value was tied up in how well I could fulfill other people's expectations. By the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, I was already trapped by it. She stood and moved to the window again, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. I never wanted to be Luna. I wanted to travel, to study, to figure out who I was, when I wasn't performing a role that had been chosen for me before I could walk. But everyone was so invested in the idea of Helena Ravencrest, future Luna, that I didn't know how to tell them that Helena Ravencrest, the actual person, wanted something completely different. "So you ran," Maya said, not quite managing to keep the judgment out of her voice. Helena turned back to face her, and Maya was startled to see tears in the other woman's eyes. "So I ran," she confirmed, "and I hurt a lot of people in the process, including Connor, and including you. I know that my leaving put you in an impossible position, and I'm sorry for that." Maya felt some of her defensive anger beginning to dissolve. "Where did you go?" "Europe initially," Helena said, "then Asia. I spent time in several different werewolf communities, learning about pack structures that were completely different from what I grew up with. I found a place where I could be useful without being a leader, where I could help people without having to be responsible for an entire community's welfare." She returned to her chair, clasping her hands in her lap with a composure that seemed hard-won rather than natural. "I'm happy, Maya. For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually happy. And from what I can see, you're happy too." Connor certainly looks happy. "The pack feels settled in a way it never did when I was being prepared to lead it." Maya sank into the other chair, her legs suddenly unsteady. "You're really not here to reclaim your position. I'm here to formally renounce any claim I might have to it," Helena said firmly. "I want to make sure there's no legal ambiguity that could cause problems for you later. I want to apologize to Connor and to the elders for the way I handled my departure. And I want to say goodbye properly to the place where I grew up, even if it was never really home." The sincerity in Helena's voice was unmistakable, and Maya felt the last of her defensive walls crumbling. This wasn't the confrontation she had been dreading for months. This was something entirely different, a kind of closure she hadn't known she needed. "I was so afraid of you coming back," Maya admitted quietly. "I kept waiting for someone to tell me that my time was up, that the real Luna had returned to reclaim her life." Helena's smile was gentle and entirely without mockery. "Maya, there is no real Luna except the one who actually does the job. And from what I've heard, you've been doing it beautifully." "How could you have heard anything?" "You've been gone for months." "Werewolf communities talk to each other," Helena explained. "Word travels about packs that are thriving, Lunas who are making a difference, alphas who are leading with wisdom and strength. Connor's name has come up in several conversations I've had, always in the context of how well his pack is doing, under his and his Luna's leadership." Maya felt warmth spreading through her chest at the idea that her work had been noticed beyond their pack's borders. "Really, really," Helena confirmed. "You found your calling, Maya. Don't let anyone, including me, make you doubt that." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Two women who had been shaped by the same expectations, but had found very different ways to respond to them. Finally, Maya spoke again. "What will you tell Connor?" "That I'm sorry for the way I left, and that I'm grateful to him for finding someone who could be the partner he deserves," Helena said. "What will you tell him?" Maya considered the question carefully. "That his faith in me was justified, that I'm not afraid anymore of being compared to you, because we're not the same person, and we never were meant to be. Helena's smile was radiant. Perfect. That's exactly what he needs to hear. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation, and Marcus's voice called through the wood. Luna? The Alpha has arrived. Maya felt her pulse quicken at the knowledge that Connor was here, but it was excitement rather than anxiety that flooded her system. She was ready for this conversation, ready to face whatever came next with confidence in herself and her relationship. Send him in, she called back. Connor entered the room with the controlled energy of a man prepared for battle, his eyes immediately seeking Maya to assure himself that she was safe. When he saw her sitting calmly across from Helena, some of the tension left his shoulders, but his expression remained carefully neutral. Helena, he said with a slight nod. Connor, Helena replied, rising from her chair with fluid grace. You look well, happy. Connor's attention shifted to Maya, and his entire demeanor softened. I am happy, he said simply. Very happy. Helena's smile at this exchange was genuinely warm. Good. I was hoping that would be the case. Maya stood as well, moving to Connor's side where she belonged. He wrapped one arm around her waist automatically, a gesture so natural that it was clearly unconscious. The casual possessiveness of the touch, the way he included her in his space without thought or hesitation, spoke volumes about how completely she had become part of his life. Maya tells me you're not here to stay, Connor said to Helena, his tone carefully polite, but not particularly welcoming. That's correct, Helena confirmed. I came to apologize for the way I handled my departure and to formally renounce any claim I might have to the Luna position. I also wanted to ask permission to visit my family's graves before I leave. Connor studied her face for a long moment, and Maya could see him evaluating the sincerity of Helena's words. Finally, he nodded slowly. Apology accepted. Permission granted. How long do you need? Just tonight, Helena said. I'll leave tomorrow morning, and I won't trouble the pack again. You're not troubling us, Maya said, surprising herself with the realization that she meant it. You're providing closure. That's valuable too. Helena's eyes brightened at Maya's words. Thank you for saying that. And thank you for taking care of what I couldn't. Connor, you chose well. Connor's arm tightened around Maya's waist. I chose perfectly, he said, with the kind of certainty that made Maya's heart skip. And so did she. The formal renunciation ceremony took place that evening in the sacred grove, with only the essential participants present. Helena spoke the ancient words that severed her legal claim to the Luna position, then knelt before Maya and Connor to formally acknowledge their authority over the pack that had once been intended for her. It was a brief, solemn ritual that felt like the closing of one chapter and the definitive opening of another. When Helena rose from her position of submission, Maya felt something she hadn't realized she was carrying finally lift from her shoulders. The question that had haunted her for months, what would happen if Helena returned, had finally been answered. Afterward, Helena was given permission to visit the family cemetery on the outskirts of pack territory. Maya watched her go with feelings that were complex, but no longer fearful. Helena had been right about one thing. Her leaving had opened doors that might never have opened otherwise. For all of them. How are you feeling? Connor asked as they walked back toward the pack house together. Maya considered the question carefully, taking inventory of her emotional state. Free, she said finally. Like I can finally stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and just be happy. Connor stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands cupping her face with the tenderness that never failed to make her heart race. "You deserve to be happy, Maya. You deserve all of this, the position, the respect, the love. You've earned every bit of it." Maya stood on her toes to kiss him, pouring all of her gratitude and love and relief into the contact. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Connor rested his forehead against hers with a contented sigh. "I love you, Luna," he whispered. "I love you too, Alpha," Maya replied, and felt like she was finally, completely, home. 1 year later, Maya stood in the same sacred grove where she had been bonded to Connor, but this time she was not the nervous, uncertain woman who had accepted a position she felt unworthy of. This time, she stood as the confident Luna of a thriving pack, addressing the gathered wolves on the anniversary of her bonding ceremony. The changes that had taken place over the past year were remarkable. Pack membership had grown as wolves from other territories requested permission to join Silverwood, drawn by reports of strong leadership and a welcoming community. The pack's businesses were prospering under new partnerships that Maya had helped negotiate. Most importantly, there was a sense of harmony and purpose that hadn't existed in years. Maya had grown into her role in ways she never could have imagined. She now moved through pack meetings with confidence, offering insights that were valued and respected. She had established programs that other packs were beginning to emulate. She had become someone that other Lunas sought out for advice and counsel. The shy, uncertain woman who had accepted the position as a placeholder no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had discovered her own strength, her own value, her own ability to lead and inspire others. As she looked out over the faces of her pack members because they were truly hers now, in every way that mattered, Maya felt a deep sense of satisfaction and belonging that still sometimes took her by surprise. These people looked to her for guidance, trusted her with their problems, celebrated her successes as their own. "A year ago," Maya said, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd, "I stood in this same spot and made promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I promised to serve with wisdom, to lead with compassion, and to stand beside your Alpha as your Luna." She paused, her eyes finding Connor's in the crowd. He was watching her with the kind of pride and love that still made her breath catch, even after 12 months of marriage. "What I didn't know then," Maya continued, "was that you would all help me keep those promises, that you would teach me what it means to be part of something larger than myself, that you would show me the difference between leading through fear and leading through love." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on her every word. Maya felt the pack bond humming with contentment and affection, 300 hearts beating in harmony with hers. "This year has brought challenges that tested us all," Maya said, thinking of the territorial dispute with the Eastern Pack that they had resolved through negotiation rather than violence, the economic difficulties they had weathered through cooperation and innovation, the internal conflicts they had addressed with patience and understanding. "But we have met every challenge together, as a family, as a pack that takes care of its own. We have grown stronger, not through conquest or intimidation, but through compassion and unity. We have proven that true strength comes from lifting each other up, not tearing others down." Maya stepped down from the small platform that had been constructed for the ceremony, moving among the crowd so she could see their faces more clearly. These were her people now, children who ran to her, with scraped knees and wild stories. Teenagers who came to her with problems they couldn't discuss with their parents. Adults who trusted her judgment and valued her counsel. "Some of you remember the woman who stood here a year ago," Maya said, her voice growing warmer and more personal. "Someone who was terrified of disappointing you, who felt like she was wearing someone else's life. That woman was convinced she was just filling space until someone better came along." She reached the front of the crowd again, where Connor stood with the other pack leaders. His smile was radiant, and Maya felt the bond between them pulse with love and pride and perfect contentment. "What I've learned this year," Maya continued, "is that there was no one better coming along. There was only me, learning to be the Luna you needed, the leader you deserved, the woman I was always meant to become." The howl that rose from the crowd was spontaneous and joyful, voices joining together in a harmony that echoed off the mountains and seemed to shake the stars themselves. Maya tipped her head back and added her own voice to theirs, claiming her place in the song of her pack with absolute certainty. When the howls finally died away, Connor stepped forward and took Maya's hands in his, their mate bond rings catching the firelight and throwing it back in brilliant sparks. "My Luna," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the grove. "My partner, my choice, my love. Thank you for choosing us in return." Maya squeezed his hands, looking into the eyes of the man who had seen her potential before she knew it existed, who had given her the space to grow into herself, who had loved her through every moment of uncertainty and growth. "Always," she said simply. "I will always choose us." As the celebration continued around them, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. A year ago, she had been convinced that she was settling for being a placeholder, accepting a role that belonged to someone else. Now she understood that she hadn't been settling at all. She had been stepping into the life she was meant to live, beside the man she was meant to love, leading the people she was meant to serve. Helena had been right about one thing: the moon goddess had indeed had a plan. But it hadn't been about Helena stepping aside for Maya. It had been about Maya discovering that she had never been second choice, never been a placeholder, never been less than enough. She had always been exactly who she was meant to be. It had just taken her a while to figure it out. Later that night, as Maya and Connor lay tangled together in their bed, she traced lazy patterns on his chest and marveled at how perfect her life had become. Not perfect in the sense of being without challenges or difficulties, but perfect in the sense of being exactly right for her. "Any regrets?" Connor asked softly, echoing the question he had asked her on their bonding night. Maya considered all the changes the past year had brought, all the growth and challenges and discoveries that had shaped her into the woman she was now. She thought about the scared, uncertain person she had been, convinced she was unworthy of the position she was being offered. "Just one," she said finally. Connor's body tensed slightly beneath her. "What's that?" Maya lifted her head to look at him, her eyes bright with mischief and love. "I regret that it took me so long to realize that I was never the consolation prize. I was always the prize." Connor's relieved laughter filled the room, and he rolled them over so that Maya was beneath him, caged by his arms and surrounded by his warmth. "Now that," he said, leaning down to kiss her with a passion that still made her toes curl after a year of marriage, "is the kind of regret I can live with." As Connor's lips found hers, Maya thought about the woman she had been a year ago, so convinced of her own inadequacy that she had almost missed the greatest opportunity of her life. That woman had needed to learn that sometimes the things you think you're settling for are actually the things you've been meant to find all along. Maya Blackwood, Luna of the Silverwood Pack, had learned that lesson well. And as she lost herself in her husband's embrace, surrounded by the warmth of the pack bond and the certainty of belonging, she knew that she would never forget it. She had never been the consolation prize. She had always been exactly what Connor needed, what the pack needed, what she herself needed to become the woman she was meant to be. It had just taken a little faith in herself, in Connor, and in the mysterious workings of Fata to discover that truth. The story that had begun with a terrified woman accepting a role she felt unworthy of had become the story of a Luna who had found her strength, a leader who ruled with compassion, and a woman who had learned to see her own worth. It was, Maya reflected, as sleep began to claim her, exactly the story she was meant to live. In the months that followed the anniversary celebration, Maya's reputation as a leader continued to grow beyond the borders of Silverwood territory. Other packs began requesting her mediation services for disputes, recognizing her talent for finding solutions that honored all parties involved rather than simply favoring the strongest. Her approach to pack management, which emphasized individual welfare alongside collective needs, became a model that other Lunas studied and adapted for their own communities. Maya established the first Interpack Council for Luna leadership, creating a network of female leaders who could support each other and share resources across territorial boundaries. The quarterly meetings rotated between different packlands, fostering relationships that had never existed before and creating a new era of cooperation among werewolf communities. Connor watched his mate's growing influence with pride and amazement, marveling at how the woman who had once been invisible to most of their pack was now being sought out by leaders from across the continent. But what impressed him most was that Maya never lost sight of what mattered most to her, the individual pack members who looked to her for guidance and support. She still maintained her open office hours, still remembered the names of every pack child, still showed up with soup when someone was sick or flowers when someone was grieving. The powerful Luna who negotiated treaties and mediated conflicts was the same woman who sat up all night with new mothers and taught teenage girls about their changing bodies and listened patiently to elderly wolves sharing stories about the old days. 3 years after their bonding, Maya stood in the nursery that had been prepared in their private quarters, one hand resting on her growing belly, while the other held a letter that had arrived that morning from the Werewolf Council's governing body. The formal invitation to join their leadership committee was written in elegant script on expensive paper, offering her a position of influence that would have been unthinkable for the woman she had once been. "Impressive mail today," Connor said from the doorway, his eyes bright with pride as he took in the sight of his pregnant mate, surrounded by the soft colours and gentle furnishings they had chosen for their first child. Maya turned to face him, holding up the letter with a smile that was equal parts pleased and overwhelmed. "They want me to help establish new protocols for Luna training programs across all North American packs." Connor crossed the room to wrap his arms around her from behind, his hands coming to rest over hers on the swell of their child. "And what do you want?" he asked, nuzzling into her hair. Maya leaned back against his chest, considering the question seriously. The position being offered represented the pinnacle of werewolf political influence for a female leader. It would give her the power to shape the next generation of Lunas, to implement changes that could improve the lives of thousands of wolves across the continent. But it would also mean extensive travel, long periods away from Silverwood, time stolen from the pack members who had become her family, and the husband who had become her heart. "I want to find a way to do both," Maya said finally. "I want to accept the position, but I want to do it from here, with our pack as my base. I want to create something that enhances what we've built, instead of replacing it." Connor's arms tightened around her, and she could feel his smile against her temple. "Then that's exactly what we'll do. We'll figure out a way to make it work that honors both your calling and our life together." As if responding to the certainty in their parents' voices, the baby moved within Maya's womb, a gentle flutter that made both of them pause in wonder. This child would grow up in a very different world than either of them had known, raised by parents who had learned that love and leadership were not mutually exclusive, that strength came in many forms, and that the most powerful thing you could do was be authentically yourself. Maya pressed her hand more firmly against her belly, imagining the future that stretched out before their growing family. Their child would never doubt their worth, never feel like they were settling for less than they deserved, never have to choose between being true to themselves and fulfilling their responsibilities to others. "I love you," Maya said softly, the words encompassing not just Connor, but their unborn child, their pack, and the life they had built together against all odds. "I love you too," Connor replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of you, all of us." As evening settled over Silverwood territory, Maya stood wrapped in her mate's embrace and felt the deep contentment that came from knowing she was exactly where she belonged. The frightened woman who had once accepted a role she felt unworthy of was gone, replaced by someone who understood that worthiness was not something you were born with, or without, it was something you grew into, one choice at a time. She had chosen courage over fear, growth over stagnation, love over safety. She had chosen to believe in herself, even when no one else did, to trust in possibilities, even when they seemed impossible, to embrace a destiny that had always been waiting for her to be brave enough to claim it. The story that had begun with Maya accepting what she thought was a temporary placeholder position had become something far richer and more meaningful than she ever could have imagined. It had become the story of a woman discovering her own power, a leader learning to trust her instincts, and a Luna who had transformed not just her pack, but herself. And as she stood there in the growing darkness, surrounded by the sounds of her thriving community and cradled in the arms of the man who had seen her potential before she knew it existed, Maya understood that this was only the beginning. The best chapters of her story were still waiting to be written, and she could hardly wait to discover what came next. She was no longer the woman who had been chosen as a placeholder. She was the Luna who had chosen to become everything her pack needed, everything Connor deserved, and everything she had always been meant to be. The transformation was complete, but the story their story would continue for as long as the moon rose in the night sky and wolves lifted their voices in songs of belonging and love. Maya smiled into the darkness, her hand still resting on the child who would grow up knowing from the very beginning that they were chosen, wanted, and loved exactly as they were. It was, she thought, the greatest gift she could possibly give, the knowledge that being yourself was not just enough, but exactly right. The moon hung full and bright above Silverwood territory as Maya Blackwood, Luna of her people, mother-to-be, and architect of her own destiny, settled into the embrace of the life she had built one brave choice at a time. In the distance, a wolf howled its song to the night sky, and Maya added her voice to the chorus, claiming her place in the eternal melody of pack and family and love that would endure for generations yet to come.